Okay, so yeah, you have your 5 branches. There's a cool tool that you can use. It's in Edit Mesh. I think Mesh, let's see, Mesh Tools. It's in Mesh Tools, and it's called Slide Edge. All right. So I want you guys to go to Mesh Tools and then click on your Slide Edge tool. Looks like this. And the cool thing about this tool is that you can use it to change the positioning of your edges without moving them away from your actual mesh. So here's an example. If I click on this edge, oh, make sure you're not in soft selection, so hotkey B. If I click on this edge and I have my Slide Edge tool loaded, I just click in with my middle mouse button, and I can click and drag, and it'll assume that I want that edge to slide along the face, either in this direction or in that direction. Okay, so let's look at this one. I think that it would probably look better if I have my edge kind of come in. Let's not do it that way. This direction a little bit. So I'm going to pull it out this direction a little, just to make that less of a sharp 90-degree angle, so it looks a little more natural as it comes out. Let's do that on a couple of edges over here to kind of fix the geometry. So find an area that has some weird overlapping geometry for you, and play with the Slide Edge tool, and then try and just like kind of pull things out. You can always affect edges that aren't directly related to that specific branch. So I'm clicking in with my middle mouse button. Again, the Slide Edge tool is in Mesh Tools. Down here at the bottom, Slide Edge. It looks like this. Once you have it loaded, you can select edges. So go to right-click menu, Edge Selection Mode, and you can go through and select certain edges and then slide them either away or towards certain areas of your object to affect the geometry. So I'm going to come through. I think I want this entire edge loop to be slid up, actually. So I slid that one kind of up to get rid of some of that overlapping geometry. And now I'm going to grab these 2 edges that are sort of hidden underneath, and I'm going to slide them the other way. So let's just sort of affect this. You can always like grab an individual edge and see what happens when you slide that edge. See if you like the effect that it gives, and if you don't, you can always do Control-Z to undo it. But right here, I'm going to slide this edge down. I'm just trying to make this look like this tree branch is connecting in more of like a natural way, rather than just jutting out randomly. So I'm affecting my topology to make the flow a little bit better. Just pull this one down. Okay. And now I don't have any overlapping edges in that branch. So I want you guys to go around, take a look at any overlapping geometry you have, and also anything that isn't overlapping and it kind of just looks like this, where it's like squishing and squeezing certain parts of your geometry. You want to go through and slide these edges until the geometry makes more sense. Okay, the topology works better with what's actually going on. And sometimes you'll notice that maybe you need to add another edge loop somewhere. You don't have enough topology to have the right flow that you're looking for. And other times it's just a matter of sliding those edges around a little bit in one direction or the other so that it feels more natural how that branch came out of your tree. Right here, I'm like, okay, maybe I need an edge loop. So I'm going to go up to Mesh Tools, Insert Edge Loop. And you can choose to insert with Edge Flow if you want. And then it'll like continue along and kind of puff in or puff out in certain areas. Or you can just add it without Edge Flow and go back through and change those yourself. But this one, I'm like, okay, I need a little bit more geometry right there. Maybe this one too, to try and make the branch work with my Slide Edge tool. And now I can come in, go back to my Slide Edge tool, and keep making those changes. So I want you guys to go through, try and make your tree look as natural as possible without any super sharp edges. Without hitting the hotkey 3 for the smooth tool, right? We're in hotkey 1, the regular view mode. Okay, so go through, fix the geometry, insert some edge loops if you have long sections like this where you don't have edge loops, you don't have geometry. Add a couple more. Insert with edge flow, it'll help the curvature of your branches. So I want you guys to go through and do that. I'm going to give you about 5 minutes to go through and play with the slide edge tool, mess around. If you need help, if you get stuck, raise your hand. Actually, 5 to 10 minutes. I want you guys to fix up your tree as much as possible, and I'll come around and help you if you get stuck. Okay, let's save your lab really quick. File, save scene, or file, save scene as if you haven't yet. Make sure you're saving to the H drive, Maya Lab 7. Everybody save right now, just so we can move on to the next step and not worry about Maya crashing. Okay, next we are going to fix our areas that have n-gons, right? So remember we have a couple n-gons on here, more than 4-sided faces. So let's use our cleanup tool in Mesh. Mesh, open up that cleanup window. Again, I went to Mesh, and then down to the cleanup tool window. Don't click on cleanup. And then I want to change this from cleanup matching polygons to select matching polygons. And I want to change it from 4-sided faces to faces with more than 4 sides. All right, so you guys should all have the cleanup tool open right now. Again, I went to Mesh, cleanup window, right here. And then we want select matching polygons, faces with more than 4 sides. Hit apply. Oh wait, and then make sure you do object mode first. So object mode, click on your object, do the same thing again. Mesh, cleanup tool, select matching polygons, faces with more than 4 sides, hit apply, and then hotkey 4, that'll show you where all of them are. They're highlighted in orange. So go through and use the multi-cut tool and change those to 4-sided faces. So I'm going to go through and fix all of those n-gons that I created earlier. Come in with the multi-cut tool. And let's just make some 4-sided faces. Okay, check all of, okay. And then once you've fixed all of those n-gons, turn them into 4-sided faces, double check again, right click menu, object mode, click on your object, mesh, use the cleanup tool again, hit apply. If it doesn't select anything, if nothing is highlighted in orange, then that means you've cleaned up all of your n-gons. Make sure you guys are actually following along with the lab, yeah? Okay, now we should have a nice clean model. I'm actually just going to save this again, just since I cleaned up everything. So File, and then Save Scene again, or Control S to save. Okay, also I suggest that you guys use File, Save, Scene in Maya rather than Control S, because it's easy to accidentally hit the wrong key. Especially with all of the hotkeys in Maya. And sometimes Maya will crash when you do Control S, so just make sure you do File, Save Scene. That's what I recommend. Or File, Save Scene as, save it to your H drive. Okay, now we're going to create a UV map for our tree. So we talked about how to create UV maps for simpler objects last time. Now let's talk about how to create UV maps for complex objects like trees. So Windows. Modeling editors, UV editor, open that up. Okay, because this started as a cylinder, right now your UV shell will probably look like mine, which is just this cylinder. This is not going to work if we want to apply a texture map. You can see what that looks like when you add the checkered map. And you see how stretched out everything is, and the way that it's applied just doesn't work super well. So let's delete this old UV shell, all these old UV shells, delete the old UV map, do object mode, And then figure out what you want the front of your tree to look like. And let's just start from there for our creating a UV map. Okay, so again, I got the UV editor open by going to Windows, Modeling Editors, UV Editor. And I deleted the old UV shells, right-click menu, UV shell, deleted the old ones. Now, object mode, let's create a camera-based UV map, okay? Create a camera-based UV map. And now we're going to go through and we're going to make our own cuts using the 3D cut and sew tool. Okay, so create your camera-based UV map. Okay, once you're happy with like, okay, I think that's maybe where the front is that I want. And now we're going to come through and we're going to choose where we want our seams to go. So go up to UV at the top and down to this 3D cut and sew UV tool. Click on that. And right click menu, actually, sorry, before you click on that, I want you guys to right click menu, edge selection mode, and then go UV, 3D cut and sew UV tool, okay? So you guys should have your map in here, right? We created our UV shell, our UV map, and now we're going to go ahead and pick where we want our seams to go. So a tree is tricky because there are going to be a lot of seams for all of the branches, and we don't want those seams to be super obvious, but we also want them to connect together in a way that makes sense. So you have a couple options. You can create individual UV shells for each of your branches if you want. The problem with that is that you will have even more seams. So let's try and make it so it's one UV shell that just gets unwrapped to be flat by making multiple cuts in a way that won't force you to cut all the way around any of the branches and separate the shells. So let me show you guys how you might do that. I think that I want the front of my map to be something kind of like either this side or that side. I kind of like both of those. I'm going to pick like this side. A lot of times if your 3D object is going to be viewed from all three sides, you want to just pick seams that seem slightly less obvious with where you would put texture. But for this one, it's okay if we have a couple of seams because we're going to have to anyway. So I'm going to look at where I decided to put this cut in the bottom, and I'm going to start, I'm going to make my seams in a way that kind of makes sense with that. So I am going to hit hotkey Q real quick to get out of that 3D cut and sew tool, and let's just look at some edge loops. Right click menu, edge selection, I hit hotkey Q, so I'm not in my 3D cut and sew tool right now. And I'm just going to double click on an edge and see if I have a loop that goes all the way around my object, and I do. So see if you guys can find one that goes pretty far. This one technically stops right about here, right? But that goes pretty far around my object. So that's maybe a good place to start, and I think I'm going to start it from this side. So I don't want to have two different seams on this branch, so I'm going to avoid that. So I'll click away, and I'll click this edge right here, hold down Shift, and double click to click the edge below. This lets you select all of the edges between two edges that are on that same edge loop. So if I like click on this one right here and then hold Shift and double click, it just grabs those edges on that edge loop instead of the entire loop. Whereas if you just double click one edge on that loop, it grabs the entire edge loop. Okay, so I'm going to go through, I think actually right there might be a good spot. Actually, I want to make my seam on this one. So I'm going to click right here, this edge loop right here, the base of your lowest branch. So everyone go ahead and grab the base of your lowest branch, find an edge on it, and click on that edge that leads to where the first bit of definition for that branch is. So this edge loop I would say is like the first main edge loop of this branch. So I'm going to go ahead and grab right underneath that, this edge coming down. Hold Shift, double click, and grab all the way down to the bottom. That's the first cut I want to make. So you can select it in here and you just use your regular cut tool, or you can use your 3D cut and sew tool. I want you guys to use the 3D cut and sew tool so you can see what it's like. But I'm going to click and hold to cut along that edge that I just decided to make the cut on. Okay. So I'm clicking and dragging, and it turns white when it's been cut if you're in the 3D cut and sew tool. You can also see that in your modeling editor. We'll see that update when we unfold it, but for now I'm just going to start with that cut. And now I want to cut around some of this branch, and I think that I'm going to have my camera view from this angle. So I'm going to cut around the back of this branch, so I'm going to click and hold to cut some more right there. And then right here, I think that's a good spot to lead into the next area. Okay, so that looks good. I'm going to keep going. Right now, I just have made a few cuts in my UV shell, so I'm going to keep going around. Each of your branches will need at least one cut going up through it in order to unfold and unwrap it appropriately. So for this one, I am going to put that cut right here. And I would say that maybe underneath your branches is a good spot, or like behind where you want your camera view to be. For this one, I'll put it right here. So I'm just going to click and drag. And this is, oops, and sometimes you can accidentally make a cut right there. If you do that, you can do Control-Z to undo it, or we can go back through and sew those back together later with the sew tool. I'm just going to click and drag all the way along at least one edge loop length of this branch, okay? And then I also am going to click around most of these edges right here until I only have one edge connected, okay? So on the very end, I want you guys to cut around most of it until you only have one edge connected. That way when we unfold our map, it'll unfold in a way that doesn't try and skew that area as much. Okay, so that looks pretty good. I'm going to leave it like that and then keep going. All right, now I'm going to cut along the next area. Again, if you guys need to get into this tool, you should be in the 3D cut and sew tool. And you can go ahead and just start cutting apart your tree. But yeah, I'm going to keep going. So I'm going to go up. I'm going to follow that same line that I made before. And here is another branch. So I'm going to go in that direction of that next branch. And I'm just going to start cutting up along, and this is the back of my tree, so this seam won't be as obvious. You guys can always try and hide seams in like underneath areas of trees as well, so maybe the way I'm doing it right now isn't the best for this one, but I'm just going to keep going because it shouldn't matter too much for our purposes. Okay, and then I want to cut this edge all the way along up here, all the way to the top, and again I'm going to do that same thing on the cap where I cut around everything except one edge. Okay, it looks like I accidentally made a cut over there, so I'm going to do Control-Z. Okay, this is the 3D cut and sew tool. It's nice, it's kind of finicky, and it's easy to accidentally make cuts where you don't want them. So just keep all of that in mind when you're thinking about whether you want to use the 3D cut and sew tool, or if you want to just select the edges and then use the regular cut tool. But that looks good, and then I'm going to bring this cut right here, and I'm going to go ahead and open up this branch as well. And again, I know this is above my branch, but this is the back view from where I've decided to put my camera. So it's okay to do it right there, or you guys can hide it underneath. But again, like I said, you need at least one cut along every single branch in order to unfold your map, okay? So something kind of like that. All right. Looks pretty good. And then I am going to cut this around the base. Let's see, right here, so that we can cut apart those two branches. So again, follow along as best as you can, and I know a lot of this is kind of theoretical, and then just leave the portion that you don't want cut apart uncut. So that one, if I go all the way around right there, right, it's going to create an entirely new UV shell for this branch, and maybe that is what you guys want, or you can just try seeing what happens if you don't cut all the way around and you just cut about halfway. see what happens when you unfold. And a lot of these things we'll need to adjust after we unfold the map. But let's keep going. I'm going to keep cutting along. And then I'm going to come up through this branch. Okay, that looks pretty good. And then I'm going to cut around the base a little bit so that I can get into this next branch. And I want to make the cut right here. So I'll click and drag. Hi, can I help you guys?
Recycling?
Oh, sure, thank you. Alrighty, and then I'm going to continue this cut all the way around and go around most of the cap, just like that. Okay, and now I have cut through all of my branches at least once, right? And let's see what happens if we unfold this. So I'm going to go hotkey Q to get out of the 3D cut and sew tool. And I'll come up here to my UV editor, right, object mode again. Okay, there's my map, my UV shell, and let's choose unfold. Okay, and it looks kind of funky, and it should for you guys as well, but that's okay. And let's just figure out, let's identify where certain areas are. So, and like, let's see if there's some skewing. Maybe right here, it looks like there's like a lot of skewing right here around this point. So let's find out where that is. Select that edge. Oh, that's on the bottom. That's because I didn't cut around the bottom at all. So I am going to go ahead and make some cuts around the bottom. So I'll cut right here. And I still want it attached by one edge, but I will make that cut. So selected edges, made that cut, UV shell, and then let's unfold it some more. Okay. So that fixed kind of that skewing area. So you're just going to go through and see, are there certain areas that feel kind of skewed and what's going on my mesh. Also, I want you guys to choose the layout tool so that this is fitting within your area where you can apply texture. And keep using this, if you use the display image plus the grid view, right, your checker map, you can go around and take a look at your object and see how it's being affected by that checker map. So see any areas where the checker map looks kind of skewed is a great way to like take a look at how is my UV shell looking. Are there areas where I have very big checkers and very small checkers? Are there areas where there seems to be like some weird stretching going on? Anything like that. So go through and take a look at how that checker map is now applying to your tree to see if there are other areas of your UV shell that you need to cut apart. Okay, I'm going to give you guys about 15 minutes to mess with your UV shell. Keep making cuts. I'm going to come around and answer any questions you guys have. If anyone got lost or needs help, raise your hand. Alright, once you're finished unwrapping your UV shell, export a UV snapshot of it. So, just a reminder of how to export a UV snapshot. You're going to click on this UV shell, or if you ended up deciding to make multiple shells with your branches, that's also fine. Make sure everything, all of your UV shells are within this box area, kind of maximizing the space as much as possible. And then you have the shell selected, you go to Image, UV Snapshot, make sure your edge color is green, browse and save it to your H drive. And I'm going to call this Tree UV Snapshot. Alright, and then hit Save. And then apply and close. And then I have my UV Snapshot so that next time I can start actually creating the texture for this tree. And then I'm going to save the lab again and just go through. So I want you guys to finish unwrapping your tree. I'm going to come around and help you, check on you.